what should our recipe service do for us? I guess it makes sense if the recipe service is the place in our app where we manage our recipes. Therefore, we should take our recipes, which we currently manage in our recipe list, and manage it in the recipe service. That's the first thing with which I'll start, so I'll simply copy it for now and add it as a property in the recipe service. Of course, we now have to add the import pointing to the recipe model file, which sits in the same folder as the service. So with that, we get an array of recipes in the recipe service. And I will actually make this private so that you can't directly access this array from outside. Now with this added, I also want to add a getRecipes method which will return this array so that we can get access to it from outside. If I were to return it like this, I actually return the direct reference to this array. And since arrays and objects are reference types in JavaScript, so has nothing to do with Angular, vanilla JavaScript it is, well, if we now change something on this array, we will change it on the array in the service. Therefore, I will call slice with no arguments. This will simply return a new array, which is an exact copy of the one in this service file. So therefore, we really can't access the recipes array stored here from outside. We only get a copy. So that is a way to get our recipes. Now with that, we can and we have to add our service, actually both services, to a place in our app to provide them so that we can inject them. Where should we provide both services? Well, let's start with providing the recipe service in our recipe component. We can always put it somewhere else later if we recognize that we want access to it from another part in our app. But for now, I'll add providers, this array, to the recipe component. Therefore, this component and all other recipe-related components, since they are all child components to this component in the end, will share the same instance of this service, but you won't be able to access the service, or at least not the same instance, in other components like the shopping list component. So here in providers, I will list my recipe service. Of course, you have to add an import at the top telling TypeScript where to find this type. Now with this, we can use our recipe service here. Now let's use it in the recipe list component. Here right now, we already manage our recipe array. Now, I don't want to do that here anymore. It will be undefined initially. We will get the value here in ng-on-init. And for this, we need to inject our service. Now we can do this since we just provided it on the parent component. So here I will provide my recipe service, which is of type recipe service. Of course, make sure to import recipe service from the appropriate file, and this should be private here to use this TypeScript shortcut of instantly assigning a property with the same name. In ng-on-init, I can now say this recipes equals this recipe service get recipes, and we will get this copy of recipes, this copy of that array. Well, let's see this in action. If we save this, we should, and we do, see the same as before. The app works just like before because the only thing we changed right now is where and how we manage our array of recipes. An important first step.